the next thing that we'll put on the boat is the RC box. Now let me grab it. Every boat has its own. They're named. And in here, in this little top compartment, you have a whistle, you have a battery for the wind instrument, you've got pens, you've got tie wraps. Okay, in the box itself, you'll have a handheld radio, ear binoculars, air horn, handheld compass for if you're the weather mark, you're sent up course to hang out and check the wind strength and direction and report back to the PRO. You would use this to see where the wind's coming from. And then what I normally do is I see where the wind's coming from and I find a land reference. You know, Fort Point or some building down at that end, and then just keep track of it. This is wind velocity. And it's just you turn it on, it's just got a little impeller and you hold it up and it gives you a digital readout of the wind velocity in knots. I did check the currents. We're gonna have a flood this afternoon, so it'll be good for training. What I do, I put it back here. Now this has got a really long line around it. Keep it out of the way. You want to keep it up away from the hose, the tubing going to the motor so that it doesn't kink them. Okay. Now we're down to the ball. Okay, so the ball is going to be one of the objects we're going to be setting today. So if you give me the ball, we're going to be doing drag and drop to set the ball, which would be like a finish or a start pin. So we'll keep it back here because this is where I deploy drag and drop marks. Next are the two dead men. Let's get those on board. Now I'm gonna put one aft for the drag and drop anchor. I'm gonna put one forward for the ball set anchor, which is anchor first. Okay, so let's have the anchors. Okay, this anchor is gonna be for drag and drop, so I'll put it aft. And the Danforth will be the first thing that we do. I'm gonna keep it forward. I got it. Thank you. Okay. Now we're to the fun part. Okay, when we go out, we're going to go out and we're going to first, using the Danforth, we're going to set the Danforth and then we're going to deploy the ball. Okay. Then we're going to capture the ball, secure it, and then we're going to we're going to basically bring the Danforth back on board. And we're going to do that at least once for everybody. So, because there's weight of tension, line characteristics that you need to understand, and so we'll do that for everybody. So what I'll do first, I'll set up the line for the Danforth, and that's going to be anchor drop first. Flake out your line so that you know that you don't have a lot of kinks. What I normally do is I tie this off to the Barney post with about this much tail, because once we get the anchor in the water and set, it's going to be made up to the Barney post, and this gives me enough tail where I can work with it and tie it onto the mark. So I'm going to come up here. This is going to be going to the anchor, so I want to make sure it's going forward. I know Tim's watching me. So now I'm made up to the Barney post. Okay, so this is going to be the anchor, and this is the tail for the mark. All right, so now what I want to do is I want to flake out the line for anchor drop first. And there's different ways of doing it. You're doing it with a bowline? instead of that. Okay, different ways of doing it. Okay, so for flaking out the line, I just pile it up. When we're done setting this boat up, we'll have you get on this boat and take a look at Mitch's boat. He sets it up differently. It all works, but it's a little different. All right, so now I've got the anchor into the line. I'm gonna put it there. I'm gonna grab the anchor. What kind of a knot would I tie in the end of this? Poland, yeah. Okay. The trick that I use is when you do your loop, sometimes you do the loop, sometimes the crossover's on top, sometimes the crossover's on the bottom. I try to always do it so that the crossover's on top. That tells me that's the direction I go through with my tail. Go around the working end, there's my bowline. Now there's a line of thought where they say you need to secure the tail with a half hitch. You can do that. That's a bowline, it's not going to go anywhere. So this end of the line is ready to go. So what I do, I put it back on the pile with the chain and the anchor, and that's all ready to go. So you're going into the wind, trailing the mark, and the PRO will call drag and drop. Okay, so what we've done is we've gone downwind, deploy, in this case, the ball, and you deploy all of the line out and you hold the anchor right here. Chain going that way. So everything is deployed. Now whoever's driving the boat can't drive very fast because there's a lot of force on the ball and it's hard for the person holding the anchor. So once the boat driver has the gap, driving along, PRO gets the ball is about where he wants it to be, and he'll yell drop, drop, drop. Boat captain will hear it on the radio and he'll yell drop, drop, drop. Whoever's holding the anchor will push it over the side, making sure the line, it doesn't snag on that cleat. When that happens, it's like, because the boat's going forward, now we're out of position, and it happens. We hate those things. Yeah. And so what happens is the PRO calls the drop, and when we drop the anchor, the mark's going to continue to go in our direction of travel a little bit, and they know that. So they'll call the drop, a little bit before the ball is to their desired position. So to do that, we're going to go ahead and rig for drag and drop. So one of the best things you can do when you're out on the water is to make sure any line that you think you might need for whatever reason is already flaked. Well, this one was pretty good. Okay, so because the ball is going to go first, we're going to go ahead and make up the anchor. And we do it the same way we did the Danforth. Just unwrap the chain. Oop, 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 oop. Loop. Okay, bowline, yeah, and the required by convention half hitch. Okay. So because the ball is going to go in first, now I pile my line on top of the anchor because it's the last to go. We're going to be out in 50, 60 feet of water. This is a 125-foot line, so rule of thumb for marks is about 2-to-1 scope. And because this is a drag and drop, this gives us the luxury of making up the mark or the ball completely. And I'm going to put in it bowling. Okay, bowling. The required half hitch, and this one here I can put around the whole thing. Now, because we're making this up totally, I can put the dead man on it. So the tail of the dead man goes on the bowling loop, and the other carabiner goes on the anchor line. Like so. So now this is ready to go. So we go downwind, we deploy the ball, we pay out the anchor line to get to the chain, hang on to the anchor, boat driver gets the boat positioned, PRO calls drop, 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 anchor goes over. So when towing marks, you would tie them off in a number of different ways. I've got this mark tied off on the cleat here, which makes it easy to get to when you're out in the water. And you can see it's a proper cleat hitch. Other boat captains like tying the marks off on this outboard frame here. Just a personal preference that they have. I don't like it because then you have to come way back here to undo the knot to bring the mark around so that you can tie it off on the ground tackle.
Occasionally you have as many as 4 marks.
I was just going to say that sometimes for the bigger regattas you could have as many 4 marks behind you, 2 tied on this side, 2 tied on that side. And for big boat series, they're tetrahedrons. I've had so many marks tied off behind my boat that I couldn't see to back up. I had to ask somebody up by the hoist, "Am I clear to back up?" Just couldn't see. These things were huge. And I mentioned the anchor yanker. I tie it off here on the Barney post just to keep it out of the way. Most of the time that you're out in the water, you won't need it. Just, of course, for yanking. And that's pretty much it. Just mentioned the boat hook. Boat hooks are nice to have. When we go out to retrieve the ball, when we set the ball and to retrieve it, there's 2 different techniques for doing that. One is using the boat hook. The other is to lasso it with the bow painter, which is a much safer way of doing it. And we'll go through all of that when we get out on the water.